Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Forgive me if I end up speaking too quickly. I've been on a lot of Zoom calls and Zoom tutorials in the last couple of years, and you end up rushing through it because you can't bear to look at little black boxes on your screen. I've got real people here, which is lovely. Okay, so my name is Frances Traynor. As Julie said, I'm a football fan. I've never played football because I'm old enough that I had a mother who thought that girls shouldn't play football, and I was very biddable. But I've always loved football, always followed it, and it's been one of the real joys of the last few years to see how the women's game has taken off in a way that the men's game has had an advantage of for a long number of years. So I want to talk a little bit about what's happened in the women's game and how we can stop the incursion of male bodies into female football. It's interesting that we're having this meeting here. Goals, if you look around, all men playing. Football is one of the greatest recreational activities for men all over the UK in particular. It's the #1 sport for men. But did you know that it's also, I've got this little stat, it's the biggest team sport for women and girls in Scotland too. There's 17,000 players in 700 teams across Scotland. That's massive. Considering women's football has come from a standing start. It was banned across the UK by the National Associations for 50 years. So we're 50 years behind the men's game. So I don't want to get all Alanis Morissette on you, but isn't it ironic that just as the women's game is gaining that sort of positive foothold in female lives that it has on male lives, just as the media is waking up to the fact that there's a growing and hungry audience for news about women's sport, not just football, women's sport. They want information, they want news, they want live broadcasts. There are suddenly more opportunities for women to have a professional life in the game, whether that's as a player or a commentator or a presenter. Isn't it ironic that just as all of that is happening, that suddenly there's a threat to female-only football, and it's coming again from men. So what I want to talk about is how we reverse that, and we can only do that through a governing body. So briefly, and I will be brief about this point, at all levels of the women's game there are different authorities responsible for it in Scotland. It's what someone described to me as a mishmash. So you've got the Scottish Women's Football, they used to be called the Scottish Women's Football Association. They only became affiliated to the SFA in 1998. They had to run separately from the men's game. So you've got the SFA itself, and they run the national team. So when Scotland go to the Euros or the World Cup, it's the female national team, the women's national team, the SFA run that. Then you've got the Scottish Schools FA that do what it says on the tin, they do the schools. And now we've got a para-football set up for disability sport. So you've got all of these different things, but at the top of the tree is the SFA. They are the governing body, recognised as such by government, by national government, by the devolved government, but also by what we call the supranational, love that word, the supranational governing bodies, FIFA and UEFA. So if you know about football, you know they're the ones who set the rules, organise the competitions, and it's up to the SFA to follow their rules and make sure all of the clubs are doing the same thing. So you know what a foul is, you know what a red card is, you know how many subs you're allowed, that sort of thing. Importantly though, they're also responsible for things like registration of players, and I'll have a bit more on that in a minute. They're responsible for player safety, for child well-being, which is a big issue because we have had scandals of child sex abuse in Scottish football at the national club level, professional club level, and right through to amateur level. There's also been alleged abuse, particularly in the United States, because they've got a much longer established professional women's setup of sexual abuse of players by coaches and by management. So the SFA have responsibility for all of that. They train the coaches, they train the referees, and they are responsible for promoting the game and make sure it's inclusive enough for all sectors of society. So anyone, if you're a football fan, if you follow a club side or you're a member of the Tartan Army and you follow the national team, you will have heard the Scottish media refer to the SFA as the Blazers. And what they mean by that is that the SFA is a bit of a glorified bowling club committee. Get yourself on the right committees and you're made for life. You get your blazer, you get first class travel when the national team are going abroad, and you get to sit on all manner of committees, decision-making committees, which are the most opaque for no reason other than that that's how they've always done it, and they don't want you, the fan, the paying public, to see how they make the decisions. Which is pretty much how we've come to this issue of trans inclusivity, all being done behind closed doors. So things have changed and moved slowly, progressively in the last couple of decades. There are now more women involved, they're even on the committees. Not sure about the Blazers, but they're on the committees. But what hasn't changed is what you might describe as a safety first culture that the SFA has. By safety first, I mean risk averse. They don't do anything that jeopardises their positions as individuals or as the body itself. So, for instance, when it comes to tackling racism, they leave a lot of that to outside bodies like Show Racism Red Card. They'll give them a bit of money, but when it comes to actually dealing with issues of racism within the game, they're not so hands-on. When it comes to things like protecting players from abuse and from physical injury, it's taken them a long time to waken up to their responsibilities, and I'll touch a little bit more on that in a minute. Often what the SFA does is simply copy what the FA, the big brother down south, does, much bigger association. They tend to have more people, more money to throw at research, to throw at creating policies, and the SFA, I'm not saying it's copy and paste, but it's pretty much copy and paste on a lot of their policies. So the SFA first adopted a transgender inclusive policy in 2017, and as I say, it appeared to be a straight lift from the FA, so imitation being the sincerest form of flattery and all that. Scottish women's football produced their own trans policy in 2019, but again, that was pretty much informed almost directly by the SFA and in turn by the FA. So we know there are cases of what we might call trans-identified men, male bodies on women's football teams. It's happening in club football, it's happening in schools, in universities and in the adult amateur game. It's not yet, to my knowledge, in the professional game, but I'm going to say yet, because that does seem inevitable. One thing that is important in football is a player has to be registered. To play, you have to be registered. You have to sign up and agree to abide by all the policies, and to do that, you register on a website, national system for Scotland, the national system. What it does, it relies on players being honest. So, for example, in kids football, it's age categories, so kids have to be born before a certain month, and then they can compete in their age category. So we're not at the stage of asking to see kids' birth certificates. However, we know there has been an explosion in a number of teenage girls in particular claiming a trans identity. The Scottish Government's proposed reform of the Gender Recognition Act would lower the age at which a person could legally change their gender. I wanted to do that, change their gender. And so, again, this may become an issue in the next couple of years where a player is registered to play for a female team, but they're actually male born. So, as I say, that might become murky territory. It's already murky in the adult game. Alison referred to an example of one that I'm going to discuss here as well. There is a protocol that a transgender player has to follow, should follow, if they want to play football. That involves disclosing their medical history. They have to have their hormone levels tested, and they have to go before a panel that includes a doctor. Again, that's down to trust, and that is something that may be missing in quite a lot of these cases. Last year, opponents of the amateur side United Glasgow raised suspicions that 2 members of their women's team appeared to be male. The officials of the opposing sides raised the issue with the SFA, and in response, United Glasgow withdrew their women's team from the league and disbanded it. Say no more. Alison also mentioned a trans-identified male who played for a Scottish university team. Now, this person, struggling there with my pronouns, was allegedly banned by the SFA when officials discovered that this person had not revealed that they were actually banned from the men's game for violent conduct when they registered to play in the female game. This person is now playing in England, where the system is different. In Scotland, there is a single national register for footballers run by the SFA, a portal that they go on. In England, registration is done through 30 separate county football associations. So this person is now playing for a Sussex-based team. Have they notified the Sussex FA of any previous bans? Nobody knows, because there is no way of checking. And all of these things are done by volunteers, so the only way to check that someone has been less than honest is by a whistleblower or somebody making a complaint. We're not talking here about the big name players you see heralded on Sky Sports News with their breaking news, when you know every cough and spit about a player's previous teams, about their family life, all of that. We're talking about ordinary individuals, and the onus is on them to be honest and trustworthy when it comes to revealing their background. So, unless someone raises a complaint, we don't know. The system is open to being gamed. Is it being gamed? Again, we don't know. Those are questions that we should be asking. Both of those stories made national headlines. They made the newspapers, and that becomes a problem for the SFA and for Scottish women's football. They don't like controversy, they don't like confrontation, they don't like dealing with these very difficult issues. And that is hopefully where we can start to make some progress. I said that the SFA is risk averse. It is. It always looks for the easy way out when it comes to difficult decisions, and it's got the easy way out. Both Alison and Julie mentioned this report from the 4 UK sports councils. It actually came from the Sports Council's equality group known as SCEG. I'll just call it SCEG. And so Sports Scotland was among those. As Julie said, it makes difficult reading. What they produced was guidance. They produced a report that had been 2 years in the making and had involved a huge amount of research, but they produced guidance, and they basically said they wanted sporting authorities, associations, national governing bodies to be more fully informed of the reality of transgender individuals in sport. As Alison said, reducing testosterone does not eradicate male performance, does not eradicate male advantage, and that report, that guidance makes that very clear. They said they gave 3 options. You can either have full trans inclusion, and that's it. You can have female-only sport plus an open category, so one that's for men, for trans people, and if women want to try and compete in that, go ahead. Or you could have, and I've now forgotten my third one because I scored it out, but the reality is they said that the transgender inclusion, fairness and safety often cannot coexist, and that's the first time there's been that acknowledgement from sporting authorities, for want of a better word. It said gender affected sport, that's where physical differences between men and women really matter, and in most physical sport that is the case. These are the ones where women's safety matters more than inclusion, because greater strength, stamina and physique of a male opponent is going to put a female at a disadvantage. As Alison said, safety is hugely important in sport, and football in particular, because it's a contact sport. The focus is on football right now because the authorities are dealing with the huge rise in the number of dementia cases among retired footballers. The SFA, the risk-averse SFA, is taking that so seriously that they have banned all heading of a football for under 11s. They have said kids should not be heading a football and that came into play 2 years ago. So we know that they understand their responsibilities, and they have to keep players at all levels safe. So if they were to adopt the SCEG report simply on the grounds of safety, the SFA would be lauded. I'm fairly certain that they would be encouraged if they said, we know in football what, for example, repeated heading of a ball can do to a person over a long number of years. We will not put women's physical safety, put their mental health as well as their physical health at risk by putting them up against men. If they were to say that, I think everyone would probably applaud them. Why do we have rules for sport? We have rules for sport to create a level playing field so that everyone knows they're playing exactly the same game. So that's fairness and that's safety. What's not fair, as Alison referred to, somebody going out onto a hockey pitch or a football pitch and she's a 5'4" female, like myself, 5'3" with my hands up really, and she's playing against a 6'2" trans-identified man. That's neither fair nor safe, especially as we know when teams are not disclosing that they have transgender players on their side. So I've got some ideas of some advice on what we could do. I wonder if you want me to stop talking now and then we have a bit of discussion and then I can talk about what I think would be helpful, or would you like me just to plough on? Plough on. Okay, so first of all, if you're a parent or a guardian, when it comes to kids football, whether that's primary schools or through a kids club, you should be asking the coaches and those who run the teams how and when you as a parent or guardian will be informed if either your team fields a trans-identified player, whether male or female, or if when the opposition does it. That is transparency. They have no right to withhold it. If they know that information, they should not be withholding that from you, and that's a simple thing for you to do. They have a duty of care to all players. Therefore, as that Alison mentioned, that Twitter thread about the under-13 rugby match involving boys running about hitting girls 18, crashing into them, and the kids are 18 months younger than them. That physical difference between an 11-year-old girl and a 13-year-old boy is huge. I think we all know that. So those running these clubs have a duty of care to all of their players, and they have a duty to be transparent. We are not talking about disclosing people's medical history. We are talking about safety. So right now, if regardless of the level at which women are playing football in Scotland, women and girls are playing football, there is no mechanism to allow them to make a complaint anonymously. They have to put their name to every complaint, which means that they're not making those complaints, because then they are targeted as transphobic or called bigoted, or they're ostracised by their peers. That's a hard one on anyone, especially young people. So that's a simple thing, approaching, if your kid is playing football, approaching those who are running it and asking them what they're doing about it to keep you informed. The next thing, and this is something we can all do, is we put pressure on the SFA. So we should write to Ian Maxwell, who's the Chief Executive of the SFA. The SFA adopted their trans-inclusive policy in 2017. It is due for review this year. They have the easy win they want because it's there in the SCEG report. We can encourage them by writing to them. Now, I could be ranting and raving, because I do get ranting and raving about this stuff, about the unfairness of it all. But you catch more flies with sugar than with the other thing beginning with S. So be persuasive and encouraging when you write. In fact, I'm going to suggest that in Soul Sisters we put up a template on our website that people could use if they wanted to write to Ian Maxwell, and encourage them, ask the SFA when they're carrying out the review, ask them, are they going to consult more widely with the women and girls involved in the game? Because last time round in 2017, to the surprise of no one in this room, you will know that they consulted only with LGBT groups. So we want them to talk to us and to talk to everybody involved in the game, so let's be nice about it, let's give them that out. And anyway, I'm going to finish off. To use a football metaphor, I wrote this down earlier and I hope it sounds okay. It's half time in the game and we're 1-0 down. However, We're about to bring on our star striker in the shape of the Skeg Report, and the win is going to be ours. So let's go.